is up, everyone? Welcome. Oh, I bit my tongue there. To another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host, dendrologist specializing in the conservation of the now extinct Robert Woods, and astronaut aboard the Pitts 8 Moon Expedition, Pete Rogers. And I am joined by one fellow nerd this week. It is devout follower of the Anthony Lynn running back gospel and queen bee of the Austin Eckler hive, the ginger woodsman, Nick Bodiford. How we doing?
Good, man. I forgot about the Anthony Lynn gospel. Jamaal Williams, what a crash and burn. I know he's been hurt, but
I know he was like, that backfield looked so potent to start the year for like the first 3 weeks of the year. And then Jamaal Williams kind of disappeared. Injuries obviously came in and bit that one in the booty. But DeAndre Swift still putting some good fantasy numbers out there, despite being on a 6-1 Lions, 7-1, 8-1 Lions. Gotta love ties, Nick. Gotta love ties.
Oh, is that? Oh, yeah.
Because they
played more games than that, but yeah. Nope, they tied. That's the end of that.
Do you see one, or do you see 0-17 or what? Let me think. 0-16-1 is worse than 0-17.
Oh, God. Yeah, because I mean, you're just
because you were at least competitive in one game. You could have won one game.
Well, I guess this will be kind of funny because they probably end up having like the two worst records of all time, and it's like the Lions and then the Lions. Then they made their improvement by getting a tie. Yeah,
that's how the Lions improved upon their just already badness, we shall say. All right, well, let's talk. Let's jump into all of the stuff we have to discuss. We've got some props and flops for week 10 and then news. And of course, turning our attention to it's already week 11, Nick. It's wild. It's also it's wild that it's week 11. And you're like, holy shit, that's late in the season. And then also like when I'm looking on the sleeper app and I look at these players and I'm like, oh, what's the rest of their schedule? I'm like, oh my God, there's still like 8 games. That's not right math, but it's 7 games. No, it is legit 8 games. I'm a genius. Which is also wild. Like that one extra game still somehow makes it feel very far, or a very long season. But props and flops. I will start us off with giving props to QB1, the man who many have been panicking about, but Patrick Mahomes comes out against the Las Vegas Raiders and drops 400 plus yards and 5 touchdowns on them, and looking like the Patrick Mahomes of old, looking like the quarterback who I drafted at his value this year in my home league, which is not my normal strategy, but I was like, you know what? Patrick Mahomes has shown such consistency. I'm going to do it. And of course it came back to bite me, but I will give him props for returning, and the Chiefs offense is starting to look like it once was, throwing touchdowns to people other than just Tyreek Hill, which is of course kind of a new-ish development, I would say. You had Darrel Williams catching a touchdown, Byron Pringle caught a touchdown, Travis Kelce did not, but Noah Gray did, so that's great. But 5 touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. He helped me win my week, so I will give him props for that.
Yeah, I hadn't actually bothered to look through other than just knowing that Hill and Williams found the end zone. So good for Noah Gray. I mean, he caught one ball and it was a 1-yard touchdown. That's pretty funny.
That's the way to do it. And I'm sure Travis Kelce managers everywhere cried themselves to sleep that night. Though still had 119 yards.
Kelce's on the hot seat. But the Pringle one is really interesting because I think that he actually had a big spike in routes run. And so that was the best possible time for him to have done that, to have responded like that, because I think that they actually did play him ahead of Mecole Hardman. So look out for Pringle. Clark's Pringle may actually come true.
Yeah. Byron Pringle, 61% of the snaps Sunday night, and Mecole Hardman played just 32%. So that's obviously a huge difference there. And I know a lot of people in the fantasy community have been kind of like waiting on Mecole Hardman to do something. And he's had some okay-ish games. But it seems like that workload for him is quickly diminishing. He's played less than 50% of the snaps through 2 out of the last 3 weeks. And if Byron Pringle emerges as that potential wide receiver 2, then that's something certainly to take note. We'll talk more about the Chiefs offense because they are getting a saucy piece back possibly this week. It's called a tease.
Yeah. Final note on that. He ran 11 more routes than any other receiver except outside of Tyreek Hill. So yeah, Pringle, he's a waiver ad this week.
Byron Pringle, something to note. I also think, speaking of Pringles, that the Pringle canister is specifically designed to be the worst eating apparatus known to mankind. You can't tell me that the people who created the Pringle canister did not realize that it's a pain in the ass to get your fat, chunky hand all the way down at the bottom in order to eat the remaining Pringles at the bottom of the canister.
What age did that become a problem for you?
Oh, like from the beginning. Because there's the ratio, right? Either your arm is too short, like your arm might be too short when your hand's small enough, or when your arm gets long enough, your hand then gets too big. Or you're like me, and I was born with like 15-inch hands, like it just right out of the womb, just had these massive mitts, and everyone was like, "Wow, Pete, you have amazing hands," and I was like, "Thank you," because I could speak right out of the womb. Nick, what's your prop for the week?
I don't have any props. I just got flops. So
nothing good happened for Nick last week.
I was so upset about this one. Dawson Knox had like the runway was cleared for him to just blow up, and he totally failed. And it was aggravating because he was out there for a normal amount of snaps, 84%. His routes, I mean, I guess 23 was the season low, but he was at 27 2 weeks ago. So it's not like this was like foreign territory kind of a thing for him. And then just overall, I'm pulling up my notes from this. Okay, of course I can't find them, but anyway, the point being, it was this should have been like a big time Knox week, and maybe I was a fool. Oh yeah, duh, because it was the Jets. So the Jets are down both starting safeties at this point, LaMarcus Joyner and Marcus May. This should have been a smash spot for him. He got one target, caught it for 17 yards. Actually, no, he had 2 targets. One was an end zone look. His day would have looked a lot different if he had caught it, but yeah, I mean, just like huge disappointment that he did not crush it here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you can also say the same about, I know you've been hot on the Cole Beasley. Is this a Cole Beasley week? Is it not a Cole Beasley week? But this was also like, I mean, you would think that this would be an Emmanuel Sanders week because Emmanuel Sanders has shown consistency as that number 2 wide receiver. And it was not. It was a Gabe Davis and even an Isaiah McKenzie week. Both of those guys had better outings than Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley. But we can all take celebrations in the fact that Stephon Diggs went absolutely nuclear for the first time this season and played like the wide receiver 1 that everyone drafted him to be, putting up 162 yards and a touchdown, which then marks a good stretch for him. For the last 4 games, he's scored a touchdown or gone over 85 yards in his last 4 games. And so that's with Indy and New Orleans next on the schedule. It's looking pretty nice for Stephon Diggs managers to hopefully he can build upon this and continue to step into wide receiver 1 territory on a regular basis. But yeah, Dawson Knox, maybe they were taking it slow with him coming back from, because he had it was surgery. It was broken finger or dislocated. Yeah. Or hand.
Yeah. He broke some in his hand, but
so maybe they're easing him back into the fray.
It'll be interesting to see how they, I assume that's what it was, but it's going to be interesting to see how like this plays out because, sorry, there's crazy noise out there. Diggs had 13 targets, and the next closest guy was Gabe Davis with 3. Like there were a bunch of guys with 3, and they haven't really just committed to Diggs as like load him up in a little over a month at this point.
Yeah.
And they won 45-17. So like if they do any sort of process versus results kind of a thing, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it might be something I know similar to the Chiefs, right? That defense is starting to figure out, like if you just play 2 deep safeties against the Chiefs and you never give up the big play, like that slows them down to the point where they now can make mistakes. And it seems like the last few Bills games, defenses had started to figure out, like the Jaguars, they were like, if we do this, like there were ways to slow this offense down. And it might be that as the Bills continue to figure out how to beat that, it could lead them to just be like, well, one of the ways we can beat that is just pepper our best receiver with, 12 plus targets every game. And if you're a Stephon Diggs owner or manager, you are sitting pretty right now. We have a lot of beef with this Bills team this week because my flop, and I hate to say Matt Breida is a flop because we love Matt Breida on this podcast. Like, good for him to still being pouting around the NFL. God, he's only had 4 years in the NFL. It feels like he's been in the NFL for like a decade.
Is that it?
He
must have missed 1 year.
According to Sleeper. Yeah, he must. Let's see. According to Sleeper, he came into the league 2017. Wow. 2017 also feels like forever ago.
What?
That's wild. Matt Breida feels like a 9-year veteran.
5th year. Damn. Okay.
Anyways, this is a perfect example of like what is it? Process over results. Is that, yeah, that's it. Well, we're like, everyone knew Jets, start your running backs against the Jets. The Jets cannot cover running backs both on the ground, in the passing game. And it was like, okay, Zack Moss coming back from a concussion, out of concussion protocol, fire up Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary is going to get a whole full workload. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. Now, Zack Moss did get concussion cleared and he did play 48% of the snaps. Devin Singletary did manage to get a touchdown to save his day, but Matt Breida saw all of that big play work that we were anticipating going to. I mean, either Zack Moss or Devin Singletary would have helped more fantasy managers than Matt Breida being the guy to get 3 carries for 28 yards and a touchdown and catch 3 of 3 targets for 21 yards and a touchdown. So one of those things where it's like all of the process, the thought behind it was excellent. It all proved right. If you combined Zack Moss, Devin Singletary, and Matt Breida into one running back, it was an RB1 performance by the group of them. But the person who got the bulk share of the fantasy production out of that group was someone who was not rostered on anyone's league. And if you rostered Matt Breida, I can tell you for a fact you are lying because he is 0% rostered in Sleeper.
So one thing to keep an eye on here is that they have had injury issues on the offensive line, and that was a big deal 2 weeks ago. But dogs readjusting over there. But in terms of this week, this was an oversight, and I was kicking myself for it. My thought process here was that it was still safe to go with Devin Singletary to some degree, and he saved his day with a late touchdown game. He did at the very end of the game, but what I figured they would do with Zack Moss out was just kind of like ride Devin Singletary and maybe bring Breida in there a little bit. What I failed to properly like absorb is the fact that they went through this week constructing a full game plan. They wanted 2 backs in there, and so they were definitely going to have part of the game plan involve Breida. And just because Zack Moss was activated on Saturday, that didn't mean that they were just going to scrap that. Now, right. I didn't think that Moss was going to be like, I kind of figured that Moss would not be a big factor. And I don't even know, like, so I'm looking at, he only played 48% of snaps. And where was he like usage wise overall? Only 7 carries. So like they did dial back his usage. He, fortunately he scored for,
he still played the highest percentage snaps of anyone in the backfield.
And
which is wild.
Yeah.
Which is one of those instances too, where it's just like Zack Moss is going to be such an enigma for 2022, right? Because it is so clear that the Bills like want him. He feels like the guy to lead this Buffalo backfield, and in an explosive offense that like can throw and he can catch the ball, he can run the ball. Like it feels like this is a scenario where he could be at the very least, like a mid to high RB2 for you on a weekly basis if Buffalo like fully commits to him. And so that's going to be like, we'll see how, this is looking far in advance, but like it'll be interesting to see what Buffalo does with their backfield this offseason. And if they make the full commitment to Zack Moss is just going to be he's going to be one of those pieces who I feel like he could either be a sleeper that people are going to draft much below his actual performance, or he's just going to be a complete bust. And I'm curious to see what path he follows.
As long as I think Singletary has another year in his deal, and as long as he's there, I don't think that they're going to change from being an offense that embraces two backs.
Yeah. Do you have another flop?
Yeah, Carson Wentz. And this one is Carson. So wild because, so just looking at his raw passing volume, pretty on par with most of the weeks. 34 pass attempts, 22 completions, somehow only 180 yards and 10 touchdowns. Now, I have not looked through the pressure rates or anything that Jacksonville may have generated. What we'll be curious about this is, okay, so Quentin Jefferson or Quentin Nelson's on injured reserve, isn't he? That might have been an oversight on my part as well. But anyway, the guy he threw for 180 scoreless yards. I don't think that he didn't pick up. Yeah, he had a negative rushing yard. He didn't do anything on the ground. They got up early, but he still, it was a normal passing day. It's just, yeah.
Is the Jaguars defense low key good? They've put together two weeks now where, at least from a passing standpoint, right, that they've very much controlled the opponent's passing game.
Yeah.
This could be just a 2-game blip, but I wonder, maybe the Jaguars passing defense is becoming less of a pushover as we expect it to be. I don't know. I have no idea.
No. So Roy Robertson Harris had 5 hurries. Josh Allen had 5 hits and 4 hurries. Yeah, that two guys are playing out of their mind. Yeah, damn.
Yeah, they're heating up. I feel like that is something too where it's an easy thing to not overlook, but just the pass rush makes a big difference. Obviously, especially with quarterbacks like Carson Wentz. I feel like Carson Wentz is one of those QBs. Sam Darnold falls into this. I'm sure you can think of many off the top of your head who they get a couple hits early in the game and it's just it just all goes to shit. The clock moves too fast in their head. They're not looking down, whatever it might be, that suddenly they're a very different quarterback if they get hit a couple times early. Jimmy G is another guy like that. So that's certainly something to take note. Who the Jaguars play next week? SF, speaking of Jimmy G.
Damn. Wow. Okay.
Then Atlanta.
Interesting.
Atlanta.
But here's the thing. Clark told me that the Jaguars are bad at everything. So I'm going to just default back to that.
That's fair. Honestly, this is the problem with putting any faith in a team like Jacksonville is now next week. Or Clark. Clark's not here to defend himself. So he's getting strays all over the place. Next week, the 49er, Jimmy G is going to toss for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Stiff arm Josh Allen.
We're just going to be great. Awesome. The Jaguars offer us absolutely no consistency. Awesome. There you go. There's our props and flops. Let's move on into the news. And we will start the news with Aaron Jones. He has a mild MCL sprain on his knee after the game against the Seahawks. Timeline seems to be about 1 to 2 weeks, which honestly, given how the injury occurred, given his reaction, there were reports saying that he was crying on the sidelines or the tears were in his eyes. 1 to 2 weeks seems best case scenario. So that's, for Aaron Jones managers, that's a big sigh of relief, and you're hoping that he comes back and he's ready to go. But Nick, with Aaron Jones now consistently out for the next 1 to 2 weeks, AJ Dillon is locked and loaded in RB1 from here on out, right? Or for that period of time.
Yes. Yeah. And I think so. So it's Minnesota, Los Angeles Rams. Then they go on bye. Jones could be back after that. And I know the timeline you just said, I've seen the same one, 1 to 2 weeks. One guy whose video I was watching earlier today, Dr. Jesse Morse, he was talking about the fact that I don't think he quite had his facts straight. But I think it's still relevant. Aaron Jones has sprained an MCL 3 times previously, one of them twice, the other one once. And I think that he just re-sprained the one that he has already sprained twice before.
Okay.
My understanding is that there's going to be some scar tissue buildup there. And so this, even though it's a mild sprain, it might take longer to heal than normal. So, but again, they got the bye week 3 weeks from now. So in a month, like he may be totally good to go. But I would, AJ Dillon should be like hands down the priority ad, because this could be an even longer absence.
Yeah. If AJ Dillon's available in your league, he's 66% rostered on Sleeper. Last time I looked on ESPN or Yahoo, I think he's like maybe hovering around high 50s. If he's available in your league, like instant ad, burn all your fab on him, because he looked incredible against the Seahawks. He is built in the mold of a Derrick Henry, in that like he's one of those running backs who just wears defenses down. I mean, obviously just physically he has that same build. But he's also shown like savvy hands out of the backfield. Like he made a couple of really nice grabs. I know against the Cardinals with Jordan Love throwing in the ball, he had that really gorgeous like 50-yard catch. I mean, it was a screen pass, but he ran it down the sideline for 50 yards, keeping his toes in bounds. So he's someone who I just feel like the Packers clearly, he's played really well for them the last couple of weeks. They want to run the football. Matt LaFleur likes to, running the ball and getting that ground game kind of being a focal part of this offense. AJ Dillon, if he's available in your league, 100% add and 100% start. Like this guy, I wrote about this in my top 5 fantasy takeaways over on nerdballff.com. AJ Dillon is that guy who's like has league winner written all over him, where he comes for the second half of the season and just plays out of his mind and gives you numbers that, or, gives you legit high level RB1 numbers. And suddenly who was your RB3, who was a guy you were starting in your flex, becomes a weekly, like top 5 producer.
I agree with everything that you just said. And I think that this is a good time to remind folks that even if during draft season, I'm saying this out loud, so it's a reminder to myself, during draft season, like if you are splitting a tie on an early round pick between a pass catcher and a running back, go pass catcher. Like there are so many running backs that just pop up. And I mean, you got to be on it. Like you got to be able to spend the fab and everything. But like we keep getting these week altering guys that show up out of nowhere. Rhamondre Stevenson, Dearness Johnson, like it's an every week occurrence. And also early in the year, don't freak out if you don't get one. Like you'll get one in week 3. Be aggressive always, but like this position, it is wild how many impact guys show up just out of nowhere. And yeah, AJ Dillon could be a top 5 running back. The Vikings, Michael Pierce, the stud defensive tackle, he keeps missing time. And one of their linebacker, they've alternating, Kendricks and Barr keep alternating, getting hurt. Like he could easily go over 100 yards this week. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It also then is all the more impressive when guys like Christian McCaffrey, who's been out for most of it, comes back and like just immediately walks into RB1. Like Christian McCaffrey just doesn't, I don't know how that man operates. Like
10 receptions on 10 targets.
He's insane. He's utterly insane. More sad running back news. Cordarrelle Patterson left the Falcons game with an ankle sprain. I haven't seen, and maybe Nick, you can shed light on this if you've seen anything, but I haven't seen any kind of like, timelines or severity. It seems like it's doubtful that he will play Thursday night because that's a quick turnaround and it's against the Patriots, which means Wayne Gallman is probably now the running back to go and roster. If you really want to do this for the Falcons, he had 15 carries, which also furthers confirmation bias that Mike Davis is somehow rostered in 70+% of sleeper leagues. He got 4 carries. Cordarrelle Patterson wasn't on the field and he got 4 carries. Like this is Mike Davis should be on the bench. Like drop this man, drop him. He should not be on fantasy rosters anywhere. Wayne Gallman, I guess, is the guy if you want to go get, but really what this spells, Nick, is this to me just means that the Falcons offense is done, because without Cordarrelle Patterson, he is the engine that makes this offense run. And with Cordarrelle Patterson out on injury, Calvin Ridley taking his own personal time, this offense really has no one on the field except for Kyle Pitts, who's my boy, but he can only do so much.
I mean, Arthur Smith has to just be like picking up the phone and say, hey, Calvin, I want to support you, bud.
I love you, man.
They need him back so.
Could you just run like
badly
5 routes for me once a game, and then you can leave? You can handle your thing. Just like 5 routes a game is all I need.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing is I've seen a couple. Dog is so pissed. I've seen a couple people indicate high ankle sprain for Patterson, and we don't know severity. I mean, it's usually high ankle sprain is like, okay, time to pee your pants about it. Sometimes it's like a 1 week thing, and it's just not that bad. But median is probably like 16 days. He's probably out a couple of weeks.
Right. They play
Wayne Gallman. Take it away. I don't want to talk about Wayne Gallman.
Patriots, Jaguars, and then Tampa Bay are the Falcons' next 3 games.
So Wayne Gallman's going to be like an RB4 as the starter. Like you don't want to start him against any of those teams.
Yeah, you don't want to go add Wayne Gallman. Don't go add Wayne Gallman. Also in that game, CeeDee Lamb left the game in the middle of the 4th, I think, with an arm contusion. As he describes it, it was just like a Charlie horse, but on his arm. Again, something to monitor. Doesn't seem to be anything too major. It is something worth noting that the return of Michael Gallup certainly kind of brought everyone back to the pack in terms of Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup in terms of their snap share. CeeDee Lamb obviously was hyper efficient with the amount of with this work that he did see, considering he finished with 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. But he played his lowest snap count of the year. Amari Cooper saw his lowest targets percentage of routes targeted of the year. So the addition of Michael Gallup certainly is seemingly lowering the ceiling of and the efficiency of CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper moving forward. Do you agree with that, Nick?
Probably. I don't have waiting for Sharp Football to update their run pass data, because I don't know like how they tried to go about this game. To be clear, CeeDee Lamb was very efficient, 6 catches for 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, not 194. But Amari Cooper, yeah. So I am double checking though, because we do have their slot and out wide data, and that is Jacksonville. Thank goodness Jamaal Agnew is not on the Cowboys. But yeah, okay, so interesting. No, okay, this is standard. Okay, so CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, they did take on the slot receiver role. 16 for Lamb, 16 routes in the slot for Lamb, 13 for Cooper, 10 for a guy named Malik Turner, who did pop up a little bit last week, but that's interesting with Cedric Wilson out. But Gallup stayed with just 3 slot routes, 19 on the perimeter.
So Gallup was on that. So if Lamb does miss a week, obviously then it looks like Amari Cooper is going to be full slot, which Nick, you've long said is, I mean, most people like that's his true spot in the NFL. Like Amari Cooper slot is filthy. And then Michael Gallup on the outside. So the Cowboys passing game, it's something to monitor. I think that we will see still very good games out of Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, but they just have to be hyper efficient as opposed to being able to just like have volume work, do fantasy production out of just sheer volume. Another player to monitor for an injury, Dallas Goedert left the Eagles romping of the Broncos with a concussion. That is something to monitor. It opened the door. I don't know if it opened a door per se, but Devontae Smith has been just like absolutely killing it the last couple of weeks. Quez
yeah,
Watkins.
The letters.
Yep. Quez Watkins saw 6 targets and filling in for that. Dallas Goedert only had 2 targets and played 20% of the snaps. So if Goddard is out moving forward, that is something certainly to monitor for this Eagles offense that likes to target their tight ends. And for me personally, I would need to find a tight end to stream because I have Dallas Goedert.
I love Quez Watkins. I've been watching his growth throughout the year. He was fantastic in the preseason as like a 4-3 burner, just roasting, replacement level DBs. And it would be super cool if he's the guy who ends up benefiting from Goddard's, potential absence. We don't know. He could be a Saturday active like Zack Moss was. Mm-hmm. But Devontae Smith, is so good. I love this. Mark of the Beast.
I thought
targets, 66
I thought he couldn't
yards.
be a good wide receiver because of his BMI.
That's right. Yeah.
I thought that was what analytics Twitter was telling me, but what do I know?
The only Twitter that I paid attention to for BMI was medical Twitter, and they told me it was okay.
So there you go.
I followed that.
No, the guy's a freaking Heisman Trophy. Like I'm very happy to see. Like I do the wide receiver rankings for NerdBall, and with back-to-back wide receiver 1 weeks, Devonta Smith is now like, I will not rank him below outside of wide receiver 2 territory, regardless of the matchup. He has been on fire, which is great to see. Finally, in the news, we referenced it when we were talking about the Chiefs offense, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he has a pretty good chance of returning week 11 versus the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Nick, this might not sit well for Darrel Williams managers, because Darrel Williams has been looking incredible out of the backfield for the Chiefs.
I don't mean to like cause concern here. Do you have any idea how they're going to phase Darrel? I mean,
I have no idea.
So,
honestly, if you bench Darrel Williams for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's a fireable offense. Andy Reid. That's a stretch, but I like to speak in hyperbole here.
But the Darrel Williams usage has been all over the place. Like his first game, he saw more snaps, targets, and carries than CEH had all year. But he's also stumbled. Like week 7 sucked.
Right.
But
right.
This most recent one, like he played out of his mind. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do this. I know what I would do. I would make this a split backfield and feature Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a rotational pass catcher. That's what I would do. But like, I don't.
But Darrel Williams has also shown, like the thing is that Darrel Williams has been, when he is starting there, he's been like not a focal point, but a real contributor to the passing game. I mean, he's been seeing like upwards of 4 targets every game. And when you look at CEH, when he was playing, never saw 4 targets in a game this season.
Yes, sorry. I don't mean that Darrel Williams can't play in the passing game. I mean more so that Clyde Edwards-Helaire kind of sucks as a rusher because he's really slow. They have him. He's an asset in the pass catching game or the passing game. So like, if they move forward with this and Darrel Williams gets 15 carries and 5 targets and CEH goes like 5 and 5, I would be happy with that.
Yes, I think the bigger worry, I think the biggest worry for Darrel Williams and just general like the biggest worry in this backfield is that the Chiefs, Andy Reid is like, CEH is back. CEH is our lead guy. We're giving him 15 plus touches, and Darrel Williams is suddenly getting 5 touches a game. And it's just like, no, that's not, you should flip those. Darrel Williams has proven, both from a fantasy standpoint and for a production, like the Chiefs offense looks better when they have at least some semblance of a ground game and a running back who can actually make plays out of the backfield. And whether or not Clyde Edwards-Helaire can do that, or they just don't do that with him, like they just never were targeting him at the level that they were targeting Darrel Williams. So it'll be interesting. You're right. It's a conundrum to see what this backfield will look like. If you are a Darrel Williams manager, I personally would not be I wouldn't panic and drop him. You can maybe, if someone wants to like buy really high on him, I guess you could do that. But I would hold on to him and see how this backfield shakes out, because he's proven that, like, I would feel hard pressed to think that Andy Reid in this Chiefs offense isn't going to like keep him pretty heavily involved moving forward.
They need pass catchers, and both of those guys can do that. I might see if the CEH manager can be robbed. Like if you can convince them that they would benefit from having the headache of both of them on their roster. I mean, that's for like a wide receiver 1 or 2. Like I might do that. Like top 15 receiver.
Yeah. I mean, CEH, man, so much potential. Awesome. Well, there you go. That is the news. And before we turn our attention to week 11, I wanted to tell you, dear listeners, about our Patreon, patreon.com/nerdballff. We have all kinds of perks for those wishing to join, including joining our staff Discord channel, where we talk football throughout the season, our starts and sits hotline, where you can ask us your most pressing starts and sits question right up into the bell rings for your final lineups. And also you can submit questions to the podcast to be answered live on the show. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/nerdballff. So let's turn our attention to week 11 and let's talk waiver wire. And since some leagues are, if you do have a trade deadline I guess trade deadline is the term. If you have a trade deadline in your fantasy leagues, that's probably quickly approaching. I know in one of my leagues, it is this week. So we're also going to talk about some trade targets, some guys that you can get that will help you finish out your year strong. Nick, let's start with the waiver wire though, and give me your top 3 guys for this week.
I am muted.
Classic.
So I think I didn't pick which one. Okay. First things first. I think that you might get burned by this, but I still would advise folks to look to see if Rhamondre Stevenson is available.
He's my number one waiver target, so I'm with you. I think that burn is. I understand what you're saying, which is like you're investing in a Patriots backfield, which is Bill Belichick doesn't give a fuck about your fantasy team. Damian Williams, Rhamondre Stevenson had such a huge workload because Damian Williams was out with a concussion. And with Damian Williams returning, what does that do to Rhamondre Stevenson's touches? However, I think the confidence that you can have with this is the fact that Patriots draft, like both were drafted, but Rhamondre Stevenson, they drafted this year. They have a reason for it. He has shown plenty for them to continue playing him. And I think the thing that is really encouraging is that he has shown himself to be a savvy pass catcher out of the backfield, something that they don't do with Damien Harris. And so even if it's something that Damien Harris, just like what we were talking about with CEH and Darrel Williams, like if it's something where Damien Harris gets 15 carries a game and Rhamondre Stevenson gets 5 carries and 5 targets, this Patriots offense has put up like 30 points in the last 3 weeks. That's still something that I think is worth targeting off of waivers and holding on to.
Yeah. So the buyer beware disclaimers that I kind of want to throw in here is just, they really have committed to Damien Harris as like their lead back. Like he's played so well. So it's possible that they go back to him because Rhamondre Stevenson is a rookie, and they like Belichick is not the fumble and you're dead kind of guy. I mean, he treated Rhamondre Stevenson that way to some degree earlier this year, but they had Damien Harris, and Harris fumbled and they never took him off the field. He's fumbled a couple times. Point is, Stevenson is still making a couple of rookie mistakes, and so he might want to relegate him to the bench, but he does have a dual threat skill set, Stevenson that is, but like, he caught 4 or 5 targets last week. He only took him 14 yards. He has not been like a big time difference maker. I think that he can do that, but I don't know. The team might want him to prove it more before they really put him out there ahead of Brandon Bolden, which is kind of surprising, but Bolden's played okay. I don't know, but it's just what he can do for you is immense. Yes, and so 100%. Given that he's well under 50% rostered, like he belongs on rosters.
Yes. I also think that it's important to note. So week 6 against Dallas, Damien Harris finished with, and this is just from my league, but finished with 17 plus fantasy points. Week 8 against the Chargers, he finished with 14 plus fantasy points. And against the Panthers, he finished with 9 plus fantasy points. In those games, Rhamondre Stevenson, 13 plus fantasy points. Against the Chargers, he only had 3. Panthers, he had 11. So like we have seen that even when Damien Harris is on the field and putting up solid production, Rhamondre Stevenson can also do the same. So I think that there is a world where they both can and live harmoniously. And Stevenson's not going to be the RB1 every week, but he certainly is a guy who I am adding and I would start as my flex most every week because I think there's work balance there. Since we have the same one, we can go back and forth. My number 2 waiver ad this week is DAndre Foreman for the Titans, as we try to figure out what this Titans backfield is without Derrick Henry. But for the second week in a row, DAndre Foreman has been the most efficient back out of Tennessee. He finished with, and let me bring it up my notes right here, but he finished with 30 carries on, last week he had 29 yards on 5 carries. And then this week, 30 carries and 48 yards on 2 catches. And he led the backfield in snaps. Now it's something where it's like, if you want to invest in a piece of this backfield, you can. I think this is the person to do it. I also don't see anything wrong with just staying away from the Titans backfield because of the fact that you have Adrian Peterson and Jeremy McNichols there kind of muddling it. But going up against the Texans and Patriots next, both who've ranked in bottom 12 in running back points per game allowed, if Foreman continues to kind of see most of the work out of Tennessee, that's a viable, flex play on a weekly basis, at least for the next 2 weeks, in my opinion.
I this may just be me sticking too hard to my brand. I have a very difficult time going after a running back post Achilles rupture. And I mean, he was under 3 yards a carry, D'Onta Foreman. That said, if you would like to add him because you need a running back, it is, the revenge narrative next week. So like, okay, I
love that.
Vrabel's a player's coach. Adrian Peterson looks washed.
Yeah. The man is like 35 years old, just got off the couch. Like,
I think he's 36.
Oh my God, Adrian.
I don't know. I have he's old, but
yeah.
The point, I mean, Foreman, they gave him 13 touches against a very good Saints defense. Yeah. Would they give him 13 to 18 against his former team that cut him? Yeah, maybe.
He's at the very least for a team that we know can run the football. Like, obviously that's what they do with Derrick Henry, but he is not an efficient play. He is a volume play where it's like, if he's going to get most of the work there, the next 2 weeks are good matchups for them. And he could give you at least something, nothing super spicy, but at least contribute to your fantasy team. Who's your number 2 target this week?
Sticking with the same team, and this was a guy that I tried to highlight on Twitter, Marcus Johnson. Beforehand, I just was double checking the scoring position usage for McNichols and Peterson. But anyway, I'll put that in the rundown. We don't need to break that down right now. Marcus Johnson. Okay, so who is Marcus Johnson? Johnson operated as the pure Julio Jones backup for the last couple weeks. The Titans. They cycled. It was really interesting. This was one where I put a few different tables in the rundown, tracking their all of the receivers, I guess, on the Titans, tracking their snaps, where they were lining up, their target volume. And what we found as of late was that Marcus Johnson was the guy who's running as the Julio Jones-esque perimeter only receiver. And I don't know why that was the role that they carved out for Julio, never going into the slot. To me, I would put Julio in the slot, but they asked him to run routes on the perimeter. That was the guy that was the role that Johnson filled in a rotational capacity whenever Julio would step out. Johnson filled that role today, or yesterday rather. He did not see as high of a snap share as I would have liked, 63%, but it was number 2 on the team behind AJ Brown. So I'll take that. He caught 5 of 6 balls for 100 yards. And he also, he added in 54 return yards. From what I can tell, he was the only return man out there. So not all leagues reward, some leagues, I'm in a number of leagues that reward like 25 return yards per point, like passing, scoring. If that is a league that you are in, then he brings added value. But even if you just need a wide receiver, I mean, against Houston, I think I might rank Marcus Johnson inside the top 36, definitely inside the top 48, but he might actually be a wide receiver 3 this week. So go get yourself a guy who is 1% owned in Yahoo Leaguers. I flagged this on Twitter earlier in the week. Marcus Johnson is the guy. And my massive following evidently didn't follow my
the millions of people who you speak to.
That's right. Anyway, yeah, I think Marcus Johnson's worth an ad.
Yeah, no, I like that call a lot, especially Texans, Patriots, then they go on bye. And it could be something where his role extends beyond the 3 weeks that Julio is on IR, just depending on what the Titans do with Julio, because Julio is on IR. You're hoping that he makes a full recovery and he comes back and is able to play. That would be week 14 against the Jaguars. But it also could be it's a nagging hamstring. They could just keep him out longer because a lot of variables are up in the air. So Johnson is a guy who you're adding. You're certainly going to get 2 good weeks out of him and could be more. And at this point, why not? Who's your final waiver ad for this week?
Oh, circle back to me. I'm still okay. Screw it. Jamaal Agnew. I know that this is kind of wild and that he's not a good football player, but
doubling down, a guy, baby. Let's do this.
So the thing with Agnew is that this is another one of those dudes that we've kind of been tracking the usage of, and he's a DAndre Foreman. Consider him that of the wide receivers. He's a dude who gets the job done in the right situation. Now, hysterically, I guess I have to own this. He didn't produce any of his production over the last week through the receiving game. He took a long carry to the house.
I just looked at his stat line because you were talking about it, and I knew he had a good fantasy game. And I'm looking at it. I just pulled up his sleeper page, and it's like 5 targets, no receptions, no yards. Right. I was like, where did this all come from? And then you scroll over, 79 yards and a touchdown rushing. So yeah, get it done.
So 79 yards of touchdown rushing. He's also a return guy. He's 131 return yards this week. And I haven't looked at the updated week 10, but I think he was like top 5 in return yards entering week 10. Again, 0 for 5. Yeah, that's indicative of his ability, but he runs in the slot and Urban Meyer doesn't know what to do with anybody besides him and Marvin Jones. They're playing Laviska Shenault out of position. And it is a super, super ugly pickup, but like some folks need a wide receiver 4 or a multi-flex option. And he's only 9% owned in Yahoo leagues. Given the right matchup, this is a guy who you're going to be able to start. Now, San Francisco, I broke them down earlier on, but I'm totally blanking on the status of their slot defensive backs. I know they've had a safety issue, but in week 12, they're going up against Atlanta, who is basically just played musical chairs with slot defensive backs since Isaiah Oliver went on to injured reserve. And guess what? None of them are friggin' good. I actually tallied this earlier today. They've allowed 18 completions on 23 targets for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. A guy who runs 4.3 and is going to get 5 targets plus return yards. This is a guy who you can fire up. Maybe not this coming week, but the week after.
I like it. My final waiver ad for this week is a guy who a lot of people were high on, and then the Rams signed Odell Beckham and everyone lost faith in him. And then sadly, Robert Woods tore his ACL. So now everyone's back on him. And that's Van Jefferson, the wide receiver 3 in LA, presumably. In the last 3 weeks, he's seen 7 targets, 6 targets, and 7 targets. And in those games has gone over 40 yards, and he's had 43 yards in a touchdown, 88 yards, and then 41 yards in those games. And obviously still to play the week 10 game against San Francisco. That's happening tonight. And I am starting Van Jefferson, so I'm hoping for a good game from him. But with Robert Woods out, with Odell on the team now, there's still Van Jefferson, still the wide receiver 3 there, still probably going to see 5 to 6 targets, especially as Odell is still getting acclimated to things. I mean, we'll see what this offense looks like, but I want a part of one of the best passing games in the NFL. And so if I can get that off waivers, I'm happily going to do so.
I'm fascinated by how they're going to roll these guys out there. Something that I flagged in the Monday night piece was a tweet that Hayden Winks of Underdog put out, where of all receivers who had I think like 100 blocking snaps or something like that, Robert Woods was number 1 in the league in terms of just wide receiver blocks. So what does that mean? Van Jefferson played a different role in the offense, right? He's not that fast, but he played the downfield receiver role in this offense while Robert Woods operated primarily as the X, but obviously is a big time blocker. And that was partially why it took Robert Woods to get up to speed. It was announced that this guy, Ben Skownerek, is going to start in
always a good sign when you just are I have absolutely no idea how to string this list of consonants together.
Right. And here's the thing. He wasn't good in college. He played at North Texas or something like that. And his I was looking up his stat. I think he went over 500 yards once, kind of a thing, and had 5 touchdowns. So this dude is not, he was not a prolific player in college, in the working in the MAC or whatever. He is 6'3", I think 6'3", 220. So this might be the guy and the team announced that, okay, yeah, he's 6'3", 224. The team announced that Skowronek is going to be the replacement for Robert Woods. But does that just mean that he's going to be the blocker? That
right.
Might
is
mean
he just on there for running downs and blocking? Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we're gonna find out tonight that either Van Jefferson has a big role, or he and Odell Beckham Jr. are going to be fighting on Twitter about who gets to be the downfield receiver. I don't know, but like, this is a sky's the limit opportunity. And so hopefully, if you like, if for whatever reason, people can hear us now, 15, 20 minutes before the kickoff, like Van Jefferson should be rostered right now. This, people will want to add him if he plays really well. He could be a wide receiver 3 from here on out.
Right. You're hoping if you are, obviously, if you're hearing this, you will be hearing this post game most likely, but you're hoping that Van Jefferson sees like 6 targets, maybe catches 2 of them for 20 yards. And you're like, okay, so the production's not super high that everyone's going to go get him, but you're like 6 targets. Love to see that. That's the workload we want. And then from here on out, he's going to see 7 targets, catch 5 of them for 200 yards. You're like, yes, Van Jefferson nailed it. He's a guy who, as we reach the second half of the season, it's one of these, you're adding players who have the potential to really suddenly be a roster changer second half of the year. Van Jefferson has that potential, and a lot of the guys who we've talked about so far have that potential. All right, before we go, let's talk trade targets, because you can add people off waivers, but you can also trade for them. And I have 2 guys. I mean, I actually have a whole collection of guys, really, depending on who you're going to touch on, Nick. But the first 2 I really want to touch on, just because they're coming off of a bad game, which you always love to see. You always love to trade for someone coming off of a bad game because it leaves a bad taste in the manager's mouth. Go and trade for the Denver Broncos backfield. Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, either one of those guys, if you can get them. They both coming off of a not a great game against the Eagles, but they're going into a bye, which is also what you like to see, because fantasy managers, if you're in fantasy is a week-to-week game. If I need someone for week 11 and I don't need Melvin Gordon, trade Melvin Gordon. Anyways, really what this is for is because if you go to our strength of schedule on nerdballff.com, the Broncos have the easiest run defense. They face the easiest slate of run defense for the rest of the season. And if you look at the teams, it makes sense why. They play the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Bengals, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Chiefs. That is an absolute glorious lineup of run defenses that cannot stop anything. And we have seen both these running backs produce elite top 24 fantasy running back levels, even while sharing a backfield. So if you can get your hands on either one of these guys, go out and trade for them. I think they are both going to be huge difference makers in the second half of the season.
Cool. Yeah, I've been a huge Melvin Gordon stan this season. He did have a costly fumble. I don't know how that's going to impact them. Javonte Williams has obviously looked fantastic, but I mean, that was the first thing this year that Melvin Gordon has done wrong. So I can't imagine. My thought has always been Melvin Gordon's a great add really at any point, because of the fact that I don't think if he gets relegated or if he's, becomes the number 2, I don't think he slips past like 40% of the touches,
right?
Which is not high floor or not high ceiling, but it is high floor.
Yep.
Trade target for me is Terry McLaurin, who has had bad results in 4 of the last 5 games. He's been pretty up and down. Like he's really only had 3 explosive games. His target totals have fluctuated to some degree, but a couple of games of 8 and 7 targets as your lows over the last few weeks is really not like, no, it's not bad. So the immediate schedule here is Carolina, which does have a great secondary now with the return of Stephon Gilmore, AJ Boye getting settled in the slot. Like this is now a good team, and the manager is going to be really frustrated because it's again, he's had 20 some point performances twice since October 3rd. They're going to be frustrated with the guy that they drafted as wide receiver 1, and now he's got Carolina coming up. After that, though, Seattle, Las Vegas, those 2 matchups that he can absolutely kill it in. Dallas, kind of a tough defense with Trevon Diggs there, but game script can kind of take
Trevon
things
Diggs
out of
is also
Diggs'
one of those.
hand.
He reminds me of times at Marcus Peters where he'll make the splashy pick, but he'll also get burned for 100 yards.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, like, I think Trevon Diggs is not a great player for quarterback matchups, but wide receivers don't care about interceptions. And so I think it's something where, he could be he could get 1 or 2 big plays on him. And that looks pretty saucy on the stat line.
Yeah. And so to close out the season, it's just alternating games between Dallas and Philadelphia. And Philly has Darius Slay, but they don't have very good safeties. They're not going to be able to cover over the top. I think that Terry McLaurin can have a strong close to the season. Maybe not the top 12 wide receiver that we kind of thought he was, but I think consistently like mid-tier wide receiver 2, I think is doable for him.
Yeah. And he's coming off of 2 games, like you said, which he very majorly underperformed. And so if you can trade like equivalent wise, if you can buy him at a wide receiver 3 valuation and he gives you wide receiver 2 numbers for the rest of the year, that's a win. Even if it's not elite wide receiver 1 numbers that we thought Terry McLaurin was going to produce at the beginning of the season, if he's a top 24 wide receiver and you traded the equivalent of like he was a top 35 wide receiver, then you're getting return on your value. And that's what matters. One final guy before we go, I have to do a quick mention of DJ Moore, just because we've seen DJ Moore be really good at football and fantasy football. And now he gets Cam Newton, who's actually a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And so with the Panthers also having a really good passing schedule moving forward, they play, let's look at their schedule. They play Washington, Miami, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and then Tampa Bay. Those are all defenses that have struggled to limit wide receiver production from a fantasy standpoint. I mean, DJ Moore's beginning of the season was not a fluke. He is a very talented wide receiver. He now has a quarterback who can get him the ball, and you're getting a healthy Christian McCaffrey back there, which I think opens up this offense to be, the focus will be less on DJ Moore. He's someone who I also think you can buy low on, especially since he's coming off of a lot of underperforming games. I'm sure DJ Moore managers are looking to get out from under him.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are too. I have mixed feelings about this. I'm very happy for the storyline. Cam Newton is someone who I like to celebrate. We have not seen Cam play really in 2021. I know he threw for a touchdown and he rushed for a touchdown.
Love to see that.
He threw for. The one that he threw for came from 8 yards out. The point is, this dude was a downfield passer who could knock a linebacker on his ass. And I hope that Cam's health is able to hold up, but his throwing shoulder has been the problem. That said, I think frankly, similar to the Van Jefferson thing, DJ Moore probably has a ceiling and he's probably acquirable in ways that not very many people are. And so I think taking this shot is well warranted, but you may lose, but hey, you're not trading for week 3 DJ Moore right now. You're trading for depressed value DJ Moore. So I dig it.
Yeah. I mean, he's been, I can't say this for certain, but I feel like he's been barely a wide receiver for the last 3 weeks. And so if you're trading him at a super depressed value, anything he can give you is a plus. All right. Well, that's all we got for you this week. Before we depart, though, I've had this goddamn duct tape stuck to my leg for the entire day, and I need to get it off. So it's time to rip some duct tape because Rodgers pays his wheel bets, Nick.
Dude, I don't want you to do. Don't ever do this again.
Look at that. Look at this leg. All right, here we go. I got it. Oh my God. Oh. I just lifted it up a little bit and
I'm going to puke.
This is really, people think that this is a wheel bet for me, a punishment for me. This is really a punishment for Nick to be the lone person to have to sit and watch this.
This is so gross.
All right, here we go.
I hope you're okay, dude.
Here we go. Leg 1, 5, 4, 3, 2. Ah! Whoo! Whoo! All right.
Was it? Oh.
Other side.
It's like a stripe. That's really funny.
It's nice and smooth right here.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ah! Wow. Look at that.
Oh no, don't do that. All right, I'm out of here. I will talk to you later.
Nick just left. Oh, it didn't even let me finish it. Anyways, that's all we got for you this week. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast and your podcast platform of choice. Drop us 5 stars. Really makes a difference and helps us get in front of more people and gets more downloads and more listens, because that's what we ultimately want. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself at PNM Rogers. Follow Nick, even though he departed early. Couldn't handle the look of my duct taped, leg hair covered duct tapes. At ginger__Nick without a K. And of course, make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting out over on the site, nerdballff.com. Until next week, my fellow nerds.